So I worked on the Xbox Live version of PvZ, which was the first console appearance of the franchise. And it was a tough project. They wanted to kill me most of the time because I was just applying pressure. And, I was still kind of a new game producer at the time, too, just doing my best. But we rallied, we got it done. And the success of that project made me a good candidate for doing a similar thing with the PvZ2 team. Now, they had been struggling for an entire year, just spinning their wheels in this room that had like money-colored carpet.
Wait, literally?
Yeah, it was like this green money-colored carpet. That's my characterization.
Okay.
I don't think somebody was like, let's put the money-colored carpet in there, but it was definitely money-colored. Like you could put $1 down on the floor and it was like same color. They had received some pretty bad direction, which had led them down this path of creating kind of like a Farmville tower defense hybrid, and it wasn't working. And they had tried it. Morale was and progress was kind of like minimal at that point. And so I was helped to reignite the passion and sort of help that project find a new North Star. So we moved the team to a new space. We rebooted. And we began with evolving the visual style, which was contentious and controversial. I mean, that game has such an iconic look, that was, everybody owes the credit of that to Rich, who created the art for that game. And he was not involved in this new version of the game. And George Fan wanted to be left alone to create his new game, which was all totally understandable. So this gave the PvZ2 team, though, the impression that they really didn't have like the full support from the originators of the game. And I don't want to be unfair about that. Like they would pitch in and they would jump on a call or they would help out or whatever, but they really wanted some space from this thing that had probably just gotten kind of overwhelming for them at that time. I mean, this is like the biggest game in a long time. And that like those road cone hats were like the biggest thing at PAX. It was just like, PvZ was everywhere. I remember walking from the bathroom to my seat on an airplane and just like counting who was playing PvZ, just like, walking down the aisle. It was like every third row was somebody playing PvZ, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a huge deal. And I don't blame them for wanting to get a little space, but the new team just felt like, okay, we got to do this kind of without them.
And this is before the EA acquisition?
Correct.
Okay.
I think, though, those guys kind of knew what we didn't know yet, which was that the beloved game's legacy was at risk of being polluted by like these competing interests that were coming from sources outside the team that was working on the game, which I'll get to in a second. So I think they probably saw something that we didn't, and that's why they were keeping their distance. You'd have to ask them to be sure, though. So we moved through the visual style exercise. And we found this happy medium between higher fidelity visuals and smoother animations. And this is when I was told very clearly that the leadership wanted the game to be free to play. And this is at a time when Zynga ruled, and unbeknownst to most of us, the company was being groomed for an IPO or an acquisition. So like we got this direction, like free to play would be really awesome. So, okay, we'll try. We were stuck in the middle point between this desire to bring the game into this new place, this new business model, and this huge bank of equity and momentum and just love for the previous version. So it's like create a sequel that doesn't totally just all over the expectations of this huge fan base that's like creating fan art and fan fiction and sending you cards written by like 5-year-olds and like people when you're drawing your blood are just like, oh my God, I just took too much blood out of your arm because I was talking to you about how much I love PvZ. Like, everywhere you went, it was driven home that like, don't this up. Mm-hmm. Like, right? And then you've got this other group of people saying, also don't up the fact that we need to play in this new space. This is our primary franchise right now. And we see this as a huge opportunity. There was a genius designer on the team, Mohan Rajagopalan, who came up with this concept of plant food, which was a consumable, and it didn't totally break the legacy gameplay because it was a bit superfluous. It was like you could use it to buff your plants or not. And so you could hypothetically monetize it through microtransactions. If you wanted to sell plant food as packs or whatever, it would effectively just make the game easier for people. So if they're having trouble getting through a level or something like that, they could go and spend a little money on some plant food and they could get through that level. And so we felt like that was a nice compromise.
Yeah.
And then we also created like a content pipeline that was less reliant on like one person hand drawing every image and asset. And then like Rich Warner like hand animated every one of those characters. And so we needed a more sustainable pipeline so that we could actually do what we wanted to do, which is create content packs so that they could be sold or given away for free. That was a decision to be made by the business people, but we wanted to sort of lift the ceiling off of what could be spent on a premium game by saying, hey, you buy the game or you give it away for free. I don't really care what they wanted to do. And at the time, people would go put games on sale all the time. Like you could do that, right? So like you can decide on a weekly basis how much you want to charge for it. And also we'll make the game able to consume content. So you could release new content and sell it or give it away or whatever you wanted. And you could monetize the plant food. So we felt like we had this really great plan that struck a nice balance between increasing the potential for new avenues of monetization and also not breaking the game. You know, and so it was a big job. It was like new art style, new levels. We had things moving in the levels for the first time. We had a whole world map where you would like, you know, it was kind of, at first it started to look like Mario, like it was like the snowy world and the sandy world, but then we had like pirates and outer space and all this cool stuff and lots of great concept art for how the zombies would look in all those different environments. And the team really just busted their asses. And so then somebody came to me and said, like in an emergency, like we need to see what you're doing. We need an example of this proposal. Like right now, let's do. So there was this sense of urgency all of a sudden, and it was fair. We'd been working for like 8 months or 9 months or something like that. So the team rallied, and we made a vertical slice, and it was like totally experiential, totally playable. Plant food was in. It looked really great. It sounded cool. It was like you could play what we thought was like a really nice 2 or 3 levels of the new PvZ Evolution, the sequel. And they took the prototype and they played it and we presented it and it was like pretty successful. But it came with the subtext that like we don't think that making this game truly free to play, what free to play was looking like it was meaning at the time, we don't think that that's possible without breaking the game. The game is like this interwoven, meticulously hand balanced by George Fan set of interdependent components. So like every plant has a zombie that it depends on for that balance. And like just making sure that, you know, that whole thing was woven together in that like perfect lineage and that perfect experience was just a magic trick that, you know, you can't mess with. Yeah. So we were kind of strong about that. It's like it was one of the things we learned. We tried actually, and we learned that you can't do that without, I think, disappointing a whole bunch of people. So that was our statement. We showed them the vertical slice, and they went to play it. And shortly after that presentation, it was announced that EA was acquiring Bamdad. And so suddenly a few things like snapped into place, right? I was like, you know, I assumed, and then it was confirmed to me that like one of the questions was like, what's up with PvZ2?
Yeah.
Before they wanted to acquire PopCap, they wanted to know what was up with this really important new next sequel of this like huge franchise. And that vertical slice answered that question successfully. Like they were happy with the response that they got to that question by looking at the work of this team. However, it wasn't free to play, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that the remarkable work that early PvZ2 team did to assist with the acquisition in this way I don't think they were ever properly recognized for that, in my opinion. And I think that they did the company a great service by putting in so much work and dedicating themselves to making sure that what they produced there was a high quality vertical slice playable prototype. So a few weeks later, I'm visited by John Riccatello, the CEO of EA, and he comes to meet the producer of PvZ2. He wanted to look at progress, and he took me aside for a little one-on-one, and he wanted to tell me how much his kids love PvZ, and super nice guy, totally cool. And I found him like incredibly relatable, especially, the game industry is full of super relatable people, even at the highest level. So it wasn't that surprising. But he was new to me and I was new to him, and he didn't make me feel that way. He made me feel like, just another one of the team. So he said, my kids love PvZ and they always bring me these ideas. And one of them was so good, I just had to share it with you, right? So he said, my son suggested, what if you rented plants, and you could rent a plant and it was like consumable and expired over the course of time. You could use it for a while, but it was like you made the plants rentable. And doesn't that seem like a great idea? And it just went against everything that we had just learned. Like if you have that interwoven fabric of all those elements and you pull one of them out, like the whole thing unravels. Yeah. So I was like, I tried to explain that to him, and I don't always expect people in leadership positions to get everything, but this one was really important, and it was like, here I am being sort of asked by the CEO of the company that's about to acquire. It was still in process, like the whole acquisition those things take a while. Yeah. And it was just like a high pressure moment for me, and I just was like, let me talk to the team, and we'll get back to you, right? And it just, everybody was horrified, right, by that. And
but there's no universe where his kid recommended that.
Good, fair point, right? Like I took it at face value, and so then I was like asked by others in leadership to do more to address this request, and if not that one, then make the game more like existing free-to-play games. And I put so much equity into the proposal that the team had spent so much time exploring and supporting. And I'm like, I'm the producer on the team. I'm the product owner. I'm going to stand by my team. And I said, I don't think it's possible. I'm standing by our proposal. We've tried. We don't think this is a good idea. And what we recommended was, if you want to make a free-to-play PvZ, start from scratch. Let us make this premium game that bridges the gap between just pay once and play the whole game. But there's opportunities to sell stuff into the game. The business team can start to get used to that. We can experiment, use it as a testing ground for things or whatever, but we won't totally destroy the legacy of the game by doing that. It's like a stepping stone. Yeah. And start now on a free-to-play version of PvZ that's built free-to-play from the ground up, so that you're not breaking anything. Right. And I just stuck to that. I was like, I think this is the best idea, but I'm just a producer. But this is this is what I think you should do, and this is what I'm going to stand behind. And then, what happened shortly after that was I was removed from the project. A new producer that was more amenable to the direction that was being asked for was put into my place, and then shortly after that, I was sort of asked to leave the company.
But like the Plants vs. Zombies team was crunched for so long, we didn't support the team, which again, very counter to PopCap. EA wasn't saying don't support the game. If we had said, hey, we're going to release this as a premium game and then start working on the Plants vs. Zombies free to play, I think that everyone would have been fine with that from an EA standpoint. I mean, they would have questioned it, but that's okay. So like that's indicative of that. And I think that a lot of the team felt really burned. And I think it was a really sad moment for PopCap in some ways, because we weren't able to celebrate what was a pretty big launch because there was all this unspoken frustration from all directions. And I think a lot of people fell into toxic behavior, which is natural when you're in a toxic environment like that.
And I understand your management, so this is a weird question, but is it just management greed then? Or why not just follow what the team is hoping to happen?
Well, I feel like you just asked a labor question, so I really like that. I think it's incentives, right? It's contradictory incentives to some extent, but it wasn't just the manager. It wasn't just management labor type things. I would characterize many things. I'm a big fan of that lens. In this case, I think it was almost stupid. I was part of the management side, so it's like it was stupidity. It was being blind, is wishing for something to exist that didn't exist. It was like if that didn't happen, what was going to happen to PopCap as we knew it was going to go away. And so, there was the incentives of the earn out. There was also like what's PopCap's place within EA. Like, you get the acquisition, everyone's really excited, but then you don't have that success that everyone wants, and suddenly you're not cool anymore in the company.
Right.
And so it's like they bought us to be the Pixar. We didn't deliver. Was one story, was that the truth? And then, or they bought us to be the Pixar, but then we stopped being the Pixar, right? We broke everything to then be part of it for this deal. It was all of those things. It wasn't none of them. Honestly, I think the team was the most innocent in that. And then I think they tried their best. And then towards the end, I think there was a lot of real frustration and anger that maybe wasn't communicated the best. But at that point, in retrospect, I don't really blame them for that. They were working their ass off, for a long time with something they didn't believe in and trying to make the best of it from a creative standpoint and a business standpoint. And they launched a game that had more downloads than any other game in the history of iOS. In the time period in the first like week, right? And there was no problems, right? There was no server crash. It's like they did technically this big feat from a product standpoint. So it's like they did so much. I certainly don't blame them in retrospect for the feelings they were feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
And I regret many of my choices. So I don't think there's the root cause analysis is we sold the company under a certain amount of incentives and a certain perspective. And that rewarded the shareholders of PopCap, of which I was a large one, being a founder, and we didn't take a bunch of VC investment, so I can't blame those assholes. No offense to any VCs listening.
There were a lot of new people in that company.
Yeah.
That came in from all these different parts of the industry. And I certainly saw and was being presented with decisions that, to me, didn't map to making the best game. It mapped to making more money, possibly at the expense of the quality of the experience. And I don't know what motivated that calculation, but wasn't really my in my wheelhouse to be concerned with that, and honestly, at the end of the day, you choose. Right? Every individual gets to choose. Like, you decide, do I want to make this game? Do I want to stand behind this? And I stood behind what I thought was the right thing to do, and I was actually not that surprised when I was told I wasn't the right guy to lead the project, because I knew of that too. Like I said that to you.
Yeah. But Riccatello's kid loved PVZ2 when it launched. He was over the moon. I don't know. He said, renting plants? Now this is gaming.
He's like, I'm in the credits. I designed this game.
So yeah, I think it was just a bunch of things coming together to create that storm that was, I think, very on PopCap, right? Like, independent PopCap would have never pushed a game to be what it wasn't. It would have always tried to figure out, how do we help the game be what it is? Or it's okay to cancel a game, right? That was okay. It was safe to do that. It wasn't failure of everybody involved to cancel the game. So that's kind of how I look at that phase. It's complicated though. You can hear it in my voice. I'm like, when I look back, I'm like, oh, okay, well, the system of saying that you're going to have these people that own this thing that gets to this size, that I think is inherently destructive. And that is a key part of the problem I think that we have, because when things get so big and they become financially driven in and of themselves, they start getting horrible. Whether they're, and that looks different in many different companies, but it's pretty consistent trend. So when I look back at the regrets, there are things that I couldn't change. So I feel like in every decision, I made the best decision I could. But there's some fundamental decisions that I think were really bad in the long run. And we got those ramifications of that, if that makes sense.
You can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax on YouTube here, or you can support us over on Patreon to unlock exclusive shows like MinnMax Council. You can call into our podcast. You can put a picture of your choice on every MinnMax video, or you could have us plug your passion project on the MinnMax Show podcast. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, and we exist because of you. Any help telling a friend is appreciated.